Welcome to today's episode of TheSquare. As you can tell, we are in a little bit different setting. You might have gotten a sneak peek at some of the episodes that Poonam has been hosting, and she's done an amazing job. But this is my first episode of TheSquare on the new set. I'm really excited to be joined by Chuck Armstrong, who is our design director. There will be more coming on some of the changes that are happening at TheSquare. I'm really excited to share that. But today we're focusing on you, Chuck, and you really set the design direction and our intent as a company.
Right.
So let's talk a little bit about background. Tell me a little bit about when you first knew you wanted to be an architect.
It's hard for me to remember when I didn't.
Really?
But yeah, because I was maybe in the fourth grade. And became aware of the developing Dallas skyline in the middle 1960s.
Because you grew up here.
Oh, yeah. I was born and raised, lived here all my life in Dallas. And it just became an obsession, a fascination of mine. My mother worked downtown. I saw all these buildings happening. I would go have lunch with her at the top of her Mercantile National Bank building in the executive dining room when I was a small child. And it just became this obsession, and so I went into it in high school, in fact, and then obviously
that early you already knew.
Yeah. I was in the 10th grade when I got into architectural courses. That actually took up half my day. So I was fully immersed in architecture. I guess, how old are you then? 14, 15 years old.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's been my whole life, actually.
Was there, a lot of architects kind of realize that they have that passion because they love to draw or because they have this idea of composition or whatnot. Were those all true? Was there one thing that kind of stood out as something that you were like, oh, I'm really good at this?
No, it was that, all those things apply. I was interested in drawing from a very early age, and I did it all the time, but I drew buildings. I don't know, little kids, do they draw buildings or do they draw, they draw their house, right? With their little chimney. And
with the stick figures around it.
The funny smoke coming out of the chimney, if they even have one. Anyway, it was more than that. I was always drawing the Dallas skyline and, observing things around me.
So you started kind of taking some of these architecture classes in the 10th grade and then graduated and went to?
Well, when I went to UT Arlington for 2 years and commuted, and I really didn't like the back and forth. My parents live in East Dallas on the east side of White Rock Lake, and so it was a long drive into school for 8 o'clock history class, which was good for catching up on sleep. But I went to Austin after those 2 years and finished my degree in 3.5 years down there. And it's a much better school anyway. Yeah. And you could actually have a real college experience as opposed to the commuter experience. So.
I'm curious, did you intern anywhere during that time? Or did you...
Yeah, I worked for a small firm in Austin for a while doing very thankless tasks. I drew and erased a parking garage for the Austin Police Department about 5 or 6 times because they were very disorganized, the people who were giving me my instructions. So I guess at an early age, having that experience, it gave me the appreciation for having your thoughts well organized.
Yeah.
So you didn't waste a lot of time.
So where was your first real job as an architect?
I would discount anything in college. I don't think of those as real jobs. My first real job was actually with a firm called Parkland and Partners here in Dallas. And I was only there for 3 months when a young fella named Larry Good said, hey, he said, come have a drink with me this afternoon. I said, sure. So I go down to have a drink with him over by the train station. The offices were actually in Union Station. And we were at a hotel across the street. And he said, well, I quit my job today, and I'm going to start a new firm, and I want you to come with us. And us was 5 people. And that firm is now Good Fulton Fairwell, GFF. As they now are known, and that was my first real job. So my first real job was short-lived and was kind of fraught with a lot of insecurity, having a brand new baby, having a house that I was renting. I mean, we went from bohemian college kids to very suburban Dallasites literally overnight
with bills and everything else.
And I'm like, what's happening here? So anyway, that was stressful.
Yeah,
and it was extraordinarily successful. That firm.
So then How long were you with that firm?
Oh, golly, that's a good question. It's been a long time ago, my friend. Decades now. Probably 7 years, I want to say. I was with them for 7 years. And then with the upheavals and the recession of the late 80s, when the stock market really crashed in 1987, things got tense.
Yeah.
The firm had to cut itself in half, shrink by half. And then I was approached by my next boss, actually, to join HOK.
Okay.
And I was with HOK for 9 years, thereabouts.
So at Larry's firm and then at HOK, what were some of the flavors of architecture that you did?
Well, in my first gig as an architect, when I was really designing buildings and doing things that were my work as an author, as opposed to just doing tasks for others.
Sure.
It was largely strip retail and neighborhood shopping centers.
Okay.
Which, I came to realize very quickly that it wasn't really truly architecture in the sense that it was a shell. It didn't have an interiors. It was mom and pop shops and restaurants. You didn't know who that would be. There was a certain amount of flexibility that had to be designed into those buildings.
You were basically creating a foundation for someone else to do things
and so
of it.
you were creating really a stage set.
Got it.
And the buildings don't live long. And I mean, although I could take you on a drive and show you 50 of them, but how many of them are recognizable? I've had many buildings that have been demolished now, because that's how long I've been at this. And those, like I said, those buildings are really temporary in nature. They're temporary warehouses of land, if you want to look at them that way. And I think that a lot of that work is due for redevelopment right now, because the real estate's so valuable, and the area, our area, DFW at least, is so much more populous and so much more interconnected.
So were you also doing that when you went to HOK?
No, not at all. No,
Okay.
I did shopping malls and then quickly got into corporate headquarters. And so I did a big project for MCI. It was the first build-a-suit that the Staubach company ever did, that
Really?
Roger and his minions did. And it was because Roger had a relationship with the chief engineer, I think it was, and actually maybe the CFO of MCI, Telecommunications. They were all Naval Academy buddies. And so that's how he got that job. And he gave it to us, and it was a huge building, and we did it in ridiculous record time.
What was it that stood out? I mean, with the experience that you had, granted you had your own projects, but they were both, I guess, different and similar to a corporate headquarters.
Oh, yeah. Well, they were corporate headquarters of a sort. And then after I did that building, I did ExxonMobil's Mobil came along later. It was for Exxon solely up in Las Colinas. And that project occupied years of my life, actually. And then also in those years, I did an awful lot of travel. I worked in Mexico, I worked in Taiwan, Japan, Malaysia, Indonesia, doing these Dubai, doing these huge mixed-use projects that are really not very common in the United States, but they are common in some of the big mega cities like Jakarta, Manila, Hong Kong, and so on and so forth. So I got to be an expert at that building type.
What is it that kept you coming back to the well for the mixed use? I mean, that's a fair amount of travel.
It was too much. and I had 4 kids eventually, by 1991. We had 4 kids, so it was exhausting.
Yeah.
And I was a stranger in my own house. And that's when I got reflective on what I'd been doing. It was successful. I was doing fine. I had all kinds of offers to do all kinds of things, but I just wanted to do something simpler. Mm-hmm. So I approached Corgan and said, do you think we could work a deal out? And Jack did. And without knowing what he was doing, or frankly, what I was doing, it was a huge experiment, and it was a huge risk above and beyond all. It was a gigantic risk because this firm, although it had been around for a long time, was a fairly small kind of workaday practice with a great reputation for client service, but not much of a reputation for design.
And so that was like almost 30 years ago, right?
No, 25.
25 years ago.
Yeah, that's 25 years ago. It was 1997, yeah.
So I want to come back to your family in a second, but I'm curious, when you to your point, when you join Corgan with this idea to bring a more design centric focus to it, how do you go about that?
Do good work. I mean, we can get real technical on Excel, which a lot of people at Corgan love to do this. Very analytical, and there's a tendency here to want to write things down and enumerate things, and you can do that. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what your process is as long as the product holds up. And I've always been a believer that the product holds up when it's being recognized by the broader profession. We've got to give the profession some credit of a meritocracy within it. And I'm talking on a national basis.
Sure.
So, if some of your very respected peers tell you that work is good, or if, significant editors and publications come to you and say, let's publish the work, let's do the work, that's one way for validation. Another one is just through competition and winning the work. And that's really what happened for me and for us as an organization when we won our role on Terminal D at DFW Airport. That was a very fraught, competitive situation with differing parties, the airline, American on one side, and DFW on the other, and they had opposing views, and it was a great debate, and American and us with them prevailed in that conversation, and we kind of cemented our role on that job.
How do you, when you think about creating a design that is, to your point, kind of peer, not approved, but peer supported, and balancing that with, I've had the opportunity to talk to a lot of Corgan's clients, and one kind of recurring theme that I hear is that it's a place that reflects us. So how do you balance those two things of having something that is well designed, but also is something that is well reflective of particularly on a corporate headquarters of a company's culture, et cetera?
Well, you talk to them about that, it's really interesting the level of engagement you'll get with different corporations because they're all different. No two of them are alike in their approach and their interaction with an architect or a developer if there's one, or a construction manager if there's one involved, right? Because it's a team that's putting together these big jobs. And so it's just a matter of how much are they willing to invest the time to do something that, and you have to understand this, that's not a part of their day jobs. Right?
That's why you're hired.
They need well, of course, but they need the building to do their stuff.
Right.
But they've never necessarily been asked to participate in the front end visioning and problem seeking, just to use an older term, that we go through to sort of analyze, what's right for you. And we do it through a number of different techniques. It could start like on Exxon. I mean, it was just a simple interview with one person because it was a building for one person who was an absolute dictator and an autocrat in that company. And so we all knew, and it was told us just straight up in that instance, that it was for one guy. And so that's how that went down. Now on Toyota, which is more recent, on the other hand, there were 150 people involved.
Yeah.
And Lindsay and I and the team, we all stood up and we went through a whole series of exercises, talk to us about the attributes. What does he want to look? We showed them images of projects across the spectrum, recent projects in the corporate space, that were kind of ran the gamut from very conservative to crazy.
Yeah.
Because right now there's no... In architecture, there's really no prevailing ism out there as a stylistic move. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's a good thing. And anything, frankly, is possible. You can build just about anything, provided you have the funds.
Yeah, fair enough.
And so, it's not like it was back in, say, the 60s and 70s when, for the next 10 years, we will be doing brutalism. And I'm the architect and I know best, and that's what you're getting.
Right.
Because that's literally the way that architecture was practiced, probably up into the 90s, frankly.
I'm curious, thinking of Toyota and having been kind of on the edges of that project, I heard multiple times that they think of themselves not necessarily as a car company, but as a technology company.
Right.
And I wonder, is the practice of the architecture, the process of the visioning and whatnot, it almost seems kind of like it's a self-discovery that the company doesn't normally get to do.
Well, they may, okay, and I've worked for all the big airlines and various things. I mean, I cite some of the work that Delta would do with their branding people, and it has to do with the way they run their company and their interface to their clients, their passengers.
Sure.
They're very thoughtful about that.
Yeah.
But they're kind of rare in that sense, at least as they conveyed it to us when we were also realizing our role as architects on their behalf in serving their passengers, their customers, and how all that dialogue would happen. But that was rare.
Yeah.
Most people, no, not at all. Not at all. They hadn't thought about it. I mean, they may think about advertising, but that's about either a product or a service, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with what's going to transpire in a building you do, which is essentially creating an environment for them to do their best work and be their best people. So that's really our job, at least in the corporate realm.
So speaking of the corporate realm, as we've talked, you've worked in a lot of different sectors with aviation and transportation, hotels, education, across the board.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite? I get that it's kind of like asking you to pick a favorite child. Or is there things that stand out about, certain ones that you like?
I don't. I don't have a favorite. I can tell you that, with no qualms, I've kind of found myself fatigued in some of these areas. It's just how many times can you rethink a fresh way to do the same thing
over
for the 100th, whatever it may be. Airport terminals they always have been my favorite, frankly, since you asked. Just because of the role they play in the life of a city or a region, right? They are the gateway, the front door. They are your first impression, oftentimes. Yeah. Whether you look at the building or not, I think subliminally you're thinking about it when you arrive, right? So those I can't overstate how important they are. I mean, on the flip side, just look at what the firm's done in LaGuardia.
I was just thinking LGA.
And there was nowhere to go but up.
No.
I have been in better airports in so many third world countries. Yeah. Much better, much nicer airports than LaGuardia. I can't think of a time that I didn't go to LaGuardia and go, oh my God, what are they doing here? Yeah. So anyway, what does that say about an area? They had other priorities, to say the least.
Yeah, for sure.
Until they were shamed into doing it, so yay.
Well, and now, I mean, I was just there a couple of weeks ago. It's gorgeous.
Yeah,
night and day difference.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's fantastic.
Are there design principles that transcend sectors? Like there's best
sure,
practices.
Absolutely. Oh no, absolutely. The sectors is a convenient way to run a practice. And a convenient way to shore up your expertise and deliver the best message to buyers, to clients. That's the whole benefit of a sector.
Got it.
Beyond that, there are so many things that have to do with the human condition that don't care what the building is, really. It just doesn't matter. And so, those are the I'll call it the universal issues of design. And they apply to able-bodied and disabled people with difficulties and disabilities, as well as all able-bodied people, and so those transcend all the sectors. And I think too, the other thing you have to know about, you just have to think about architecture, and this is the way I think about architecture. I always have it. It isn't about the object. It isn't about its place in history or its influences. It's about the experience that it imparts. And then you just ask yourself a simple set of questions. Did I make a good impression? Did I make it easier for people to use this facility and do whatever it might have been that they needed to do? Is it a place they want to return to again and again and again? Again, the corporate condition.
Right.
Wouldn't you like to think that you'd get up in the morning and want to go to work in a big, bad way? I mean, like really want to be there? So, I tell people all the time, at least in that space, that their biggest expense is not the building at all. It's the people that work there. And I think now more than ever, the power of place, the power of making that a great, memorable place has never been more important. When we've all discovered how to work in a dispersed way.
Right.
All in our bedrooms or dining rooms or what have you.
Sure.
I think that everyone's kind of figured out by now how that falls short.
Yeah.
Compared to the cohesiveness, the collaboration, and so on and so forth.
For sure.
Of being in a place. So yeah, I mean, human experience is universal. The human, and Hugo and we are going to do more work on this in the coming months, actually. About thinking of common experiences, a set of common responses to common spaces, just as a validated scientific method as opposed to just empirical or, just trial and error and common sense, if you will.
Looking back on the last 25 years or even the last 40 years of your career, are there projects that stand out, not necessarily as the biggest, but ones that just really stick in your mind that you're really proud of?
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
What
absolutely.
are some of those?
Parkland Hospital. Above and beyond all of them. Now, why is that? Is it because of a great big glassy box? No. Is it because it's, one of the largest hospitals that's been done in the Western Hemisphere? No, it's none of that. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with its critical success in the press and in the profession. And also, and that wasn't me saying so.
Right.
And also, just because it was a building that was so singularly focused and dedicated to the mission. Its mission, as opposed to being a work of some one person's ego. Because I can tell you with no qualms, within the client side, there were no egos involved in it. There were a lot of debating and, but as the architects, as a good and cohesive team, our ideas prevailed, and I think they proved up. So that's one. I'm super proud of the work we did in Sacramento. Mm-hmm. My grandparents lived in Sacramento, California all my life, so that was another town I was visiting,
Yep.
right? As a child in California, the first place I ever went in California, which, after Texas is the place I've spent most of my time, both in childhood and adulthood. And then interesting, I'm not that many people talked about it. We didn't really receive as much press for it as I would have liked, but Love Field. Mm. And the reason is because you live here. This is your town,
Sure,
my town, right?
Absolutely.
And so people talk to you about it all the time. Hey, I love that. I love what you did there, you know? And so you hear, so it's always nice to get praise directly from somebody as opposed to, anybody writing good or bad things in the critical press.
Well, and it's nice. I was there, I guess my family flew in 2 nights ago to Love Field, and my boys know that, Corgan worked on that project.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is Daddy's airport. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, it's not exactly Daddy's airport, but, it's something that, like you said, it's local. There's something there that's tangible about it.
Yeah, I mean, when I go with my girls or any of my kids on international trips through Terminal D, I always get this. Yeah. Who designed this airport? Are we ever going to get, And they just do it on purpose.
Yeah. I'm curious, you talked a little about sometimes there being fatigue in doing the same kind of projects, especially if they're having to be done in a similar way. How do you deal with dry spells or just being creatively drained? That's just part of the process, but what do you do to keep yourself inspired?
Oh, things outside of work, frankly. I have never, ever in my, 40 years of doing this, really, I've never visualized anything, any solution that was at the core, of a solution that wasn't a building that was already somewhat preordained, because there are those buildings that are preordained by typologies, by precedent.
Sure.
And then there are those where you have a true, genuine creative opportunity to do something unique, because that's hard and it's rare. But I have never actually succeeded in that end by trying to do it. Now, that makes no sense, does it, right?
It's counterintuitive.
It's kind of like, well, I was sitting at my drawing table staring at a blank piece of paper, and I was like, oh, what's it going to be? No, never, ever once does it happen that way. So the way to be creative is to get out of your fixed, rigid setting. Go walk around the park. Get in your car. Although that's not the best because it's distracting.
Fair enough.
Of course, who's paying attention to driving these days? Anyway, or go out in the garden.
Yeah.
Take a walk in the woods. I collect plants. Go out and fiddle around in the greenhouse. Go paint. I paint. So I do things beyond what this work gig. And it's in those moments, it's in those times when I least expect it and I'm not trying, that's when I get those ideas. And it's just, now, of course, you're primed and ready.
Right.
I'm doing this, but I'm also, I'm working.
Right.
And this is the most serious side of work. Because doing the drawing, that's for me, for a lot of people, that's just, I got to do that, and it's going to be from A to Z, and I'll be finished. But that's just going to take a few minutes by comparison to, well, what am I doing? What's that drawing about? And then you start the process of iterating and reiterating. Once you get the germ of the strong idea, and if it's a really strong diagram and a really strong idea, usually if you're, after a while you get good at this, you don't need to just kill it and iterate it to death. It's just going to be clear. And that clarity of purpose and reasoning and rationale behind it, that's what separates good architecture from either generic or poor work.
Where is your passion for the design process rooted? Where do you think that comes from?
I don't know. Like I told you at the beginning of this talk, I always wanted to be an architect. So that's kind of like asking somebody, fundamental question, why are you
breathing?
Why are you male? Why are you from Texas? I just was.
Was there ever a chance of you doing anything else, or was it just always been architecture?
No, not a prayer. No way.
Is there a story or a project or an environment that you haven't created that you really want to?
Oh yeah. Oh God, yeah.
What's on the bucket list?
Oh, well, I don't worry about that too much. But I really would have loved to do an art museum. Yeah, because I love art. Mm-hmm. I have spent countless hours at the great art museums in the world, right? I've been all over the world, and that's always something, at least in big cities, I seek out is, what is the great art museum or museums? Go check out their collection, what have you. So yeah, that would have been a really great one to do. I never even got close to one, though, in terms of an opportunity.
Yeah.
I suppose in our role now, and given the scale and the stature of our firm, being in an associative relationship with an architect in that regard would be something that's possible. Mm-hmm. It's just that there's been such a spate of construction of art museums that occurred 10 years back, going back 30 years.
Yeah.
I don't know who needs one now.
Fair enough.
Frankly,
yeah,
it's a saturated market. But yeah, that's one for sure.
Is there? I was in London a couple of months ago for helping with a project, and the Tate Modern is just one that just stands out. Like anytime I have a chance,
been there. I
really
got to go.
I
haven't been to London since 2008. I got to go to London. I'm going to go next summer.
Is there a museum that stands out that's like one of your favorites?
Oh, too many to name. Well, the Kimball. I mean, that's immediate,
yeah.
right? Because that's a unique and seminal building that might have actually been a catalyst for a tremendous renaissance in art museums, but not another one ever did it as well as that. I think the East Wing of the National Gallery is phenomenal. We could do another
create
talk.
A whole list.
We could do another square on this if you wanna, but it's going to get real thick and academic. It would need to be illustrated.
So I know that it was always architecture for you, but is there anything you wish you'd done differently along your career?
Oh yeah, how about every other week? No, I don't think so. I think that differently in your career. I really could only do what I've done in the sense that being the designer, the creative person at the center of a beginning of a project is where I'm best suited. There are a lot of architects who go through their careers and, they're all brainwashed and trained in college to be designers, but the real fact is not everybody will be.
Right.
Okay. You may have this burning desire, but not the necessary or foundational talent. So they're all running firms, or they're being managers and wishing they had created the Pritzker Prize winning project or something along those lines. That happened. That's common in this profession. I don't suffer from any of that because I've probably had a couple of careers compared to a lot of people I know. Now, obviously, you've got organizations that we work with that just design buildings. They don't do production. They just design buildings. They run design studios. They're very creatively oriented. I've visited Zaha Hadid's office, Foster's office. There's, of course, Jeannie Gang up in Chicago.
For sure.
All these folks, and they are running a different sort of organization. It feels much more like being in college. So I value my personal time.
Fair enough, yeah.
I value, that downtime. And as I said, without it, I don't think I could do my job, frankly, because the ideas come from somewhere that's, not so deliberate.
So along that lines, what's something that you love to do that has nothing to do with architecture, even though it may be cause for inspiration? But what's something
it's all my gardening and my plants and travel. Now, travel's been a little bit weird, obviously.
Yeah, for the last couple of years.
People go places, and I have, but not like I usually do. So that's been kind of a drag, truthfully. But I've got a big greenhouse too, actually 2 greenhouses in the backyard, and I go in there and I just kind of fiddle with my plants, and I'm very good at it. I have too many, if you're good at it, you just get more. You get more, you get
add.
more. And so, that's my therapy. I would always say that's my therapy. And then the other thing is painting. I started painting again in 2017, and probably done 20 canvases of various scales and sizes of all kinds of subjects. But, it's just fun to do things with your hands. Because the operation of architecture now with the computer involved, it devalues the hand. Well, I shouldn't say it that way.
It definitely changes it.
Well, in a practice, so many younger people, they don't draw at all. All they can do is manipulate the computer, which is fine because it's a powerful, fast tool. I don't know if it has as much soul in it when it comes to the origination of ideas. But then I'm old school in that regard, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, if you look at a lot of really, really accomplished architects, they will all show these very abstract, crude, generational ideas toward the final solution if you just study that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting to see the process and how it plays out in different places.
Tell me, we'll switch gears here for a little bit. Your wife, Lynn, your kids, they're all, are very creative. How do you foster that creativity in a family culture?
They couldn't help it. They couldn't help it. My house is full of my own and Lynn's paintings. I have a few from other people, right? Photographs, some other stuff we've collected with no more space on the walls. So now they just pile up in the studio. But they were immersed in it as children, as infants. They could go out in the backyard any day in Lynn's studio and watch her making things every single day. Now, I never did that. Once in a while I'd come home and do things on the dining room table, right?
Sure.
And usually when I was doing things on the dining room table, the kids were elsewhere because that was a request. Hey, could you guys, go get ice cream for 3 hours? Or could you, Daddy's big. But I generally would come to the office. That was a rare instance if I had to watch the kids or something. So with their mother, anyway, they were constantly engaged and aware of the process of just didn't everybody's mom go out in the back and just make stuff all day long, because that's what they were immersed in. And then we drug them to art museums and cultural institutions, and I mean in some cases drug them kicking and screaming. But they're all just completely immersed and aware of that. Two of my children went to the arts magnet high school. One of them went to the TAG High School here in Dallas. They're all very academically accomplished or artistically accomplished. My youngest daughter is an architect, licensed architect now in California. She just got that a few weeks ago.
That's
so
awesome.
Right?
Yeah,
So
congratulations
So
to
that
her.
happened, and I wish her a life of less misery.
As every father probably does.
But living in California, and whatever. I'm sure she'll figure it out. Yeah. But anyway, yeah, very proud of that. And yeah, they're all in some level of creative pursuit.
Let's talk a little bit more about the profession. How is it, to your almost 40 years of experience, how has it changed since it started?
Immensely. It's changed immensely. And a lot of it does revolve around technology. So, just to put it in perspective, when I first started my career in doing these simple stage set, buildings that I was doing, we would design one by hand, all hand drawings in 2 weeks, let's say 3 weeks max. And then we'd finish the production on it in another 6 weeks. So 9 weeks, maybe, give or take, 10, 12 weeks, maybe longer if it's a really big project. And you drew these things, every line on a piece of paper with your hands. And this was even before pin bar drafting and other things came in that were efficiency measures. But we can do that sort of work now in so much less time due to BIM, CAD. So the technology has condensed our investment in time. And in a way, it's given us more time to work on the front end and organize our thoughts better before we go into, so the workflow has shifted more to the front end and not so much in the middle of the project during construction documents like it was when we were all doing everything via analog.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also our ability to visualize things. I mean, as you all well know, since you're our collaborators and creators on the imaging that we do, that we can do things in a miraculous amount of time. Literally, I look at it every day, and it's just astounding. What we're able to do. So that's tremendous. And then, of course, construction technology has changed somewhat. It's still very much the same as it has been. I mean, things get better from a durability, and then, of course, the whole issue of sustainability and energy conservation and performance in buildings. We never talked about that at all. I mean, the issue was at hand, right, with the environment and what we all knew we were doing to the environment a very long time ago. Knowing and acting on it are two different things.
Sure.
So, those things have changed tremendously.
How do you think the firm has changed over the last 25 years?
It's like a whole other place. I mean, I'll tell you what hasn't changed, though. I mean, again, it's along the same lines, right? And forget the scale and the billings and the, all of that. That's been on a fairly steady upward incline in this organization. I think why that's the case is because we're very honest brokers. We're very trustworthy people. We instill that in everybody who works for us. We want to represent our clients' needs and interests very honestly and just be there. If we mess up, we'll take care of it. We don't like to be taken advantage of, but on the other hand, we're there to serve a client. And I think the delivery of good service is also done via really outstanding design. So those things are all symbiotic. And I think the core, just the core of the kind of the ethos and the culture of this organization is the strength of this organization. And I hope that prevails. I think it's fantastic.
Just a couple of years ago, you became a fellow with
Yeah,
AIA.
it's longer than a couple of years now. About 7.
Is it 7?
Yeah,
Okay.
15.
How
2015.
What has that meant to you?
Oh, it's nice. It's a great honor to get. It was a bit of a grind to get there, just through portfolio submissions and jurors and all these things, right? I was mostly just very grateful and humble to be nominated in the first place. But it's kind of historically been a good old boys club. I think that the membership of the College of Fellows is starting to reflect society better now. That's conscious. That's been an ongoing activity within the AIA, and it opens you. I'll tell you what it's done though. Besides just feeling nice about it and proud about it, it opens up a network of people that are accessible to you that may not have been before. If we want to collaborate, it's easy for me to pick up a telephone and call somebody, and they will they will call back.
Right.
They won't just, if you've got this credential and you're all part of a really very, very, very small club.
Sure.
I think everybody treats one another quite well there. At least that's been my experience to date. And I think it served our firm quite nicely as well, in some of our collaborations.
What are some things that excite you about the future of architecture?
Oh, excite me about the future. Oh, excitement. Is it excitement or is it
There can be
concern?
concerns.
Well, I look at everything as an opportunity. You got to be, if you're not optimistic, you should do something else for a living.
Fair enough.
Okay. What excites me is the opportunity to somehow leverage our creative strengths and technology to really overcome what's a problem in the cost of construction. I mean, if you look at the global population, there are maybe 1 billion people on planet Earth that live in substandard housing. That they scrape together with whatever available things laying around.
Right.
And the reason they do that is because they live in countries that don't have supply chains, that don't have an industrial output. And I think we have got to solve that problem because we have too many people in the world that are living in misery. So affordable construction, I won't just say affordable housing. I'm literally talking about everything. It is, and maybe the economy will settle out. Once we get past the pandemic, the shock of the pandemic.
Sure.
But it's still, predictably going to cost more to build anything.
Right.
And I just think we've got to come up with ways to take that pressure off because we need so much. We need to replace building stock in every city in the world so that they're more performative from an energy perspective. I mean, we have millions of buildings that just leak heat out into the environment, and we've got to fix that. But at the cost of replacement now, it's not just a walk in the park.
Sure.
So that's a huge concern I have, that I think that if we're really smart about it, it could become a tremendous opportunity.
Well, and there has been, it seems like there's been a much more of a focus and an awareness of sustainability from an aspect beyond, do I get to save money on energy?
Oh no, it's way more than that. It's so complicated. Yeah, absolutely. It's not just I mean, that's the easiest one to measure, frankly.
Right, sure.
But I think it's not sustainable to only be able to afford to build something if you're super wealthy.
Right.
Is that sustainable?
No, absolutely.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, we have to get back to the core utility of why, mankind built in the first place.
Sure.
And maybe reestablish ways to get there.
Final question. There's through the design program at Corgan, there's a lot of people that are, pursuing that track. I'm curious, what's What's the words of advice, whether it's something you wish someone had told you early on or something that you have for them?
Oh, yeah.
And in terms of how they progress, not just in their career, but as a designer and an architect.
Don't wait for permission. Don't wait for permission.
That's a good one.
Don't wait for permission. I think a lot of young people are looking for permission, and then they want a participation trophy. I know this, having raised 4 kids that were looking for,
Yeah.
And then I told them, all 4 of my kids, just don't wait for permission, and there will be no participation trophy. Just do it. Just do it. Get out and do it. And well, what does that mean? Go ask questions. Be curious. Be inquisitive of what your neighbors are doing. If you're working in interiors, go see what your buddies in the schools team are up to. If you're working in aviation, go see what the corporate folks are doing. Get out of your sector from an awareness perspective. And it's back to, the question in our conversation about, well, what's common between these things? More things than we can possibly talk about. And so I think that the firm's strength lies in the solidification of the sectors, but also the cross-pollination of ideas and truths in architecture as they apply to anything. And our groups within the advocates and our design council have conversations on a monthly basis that just solidify these things. And it's been great. It's been enriching. And it also creates an esprit de corps and friendships within that cohort that I think are super important. So yeah, don't wait for permission. That's my advice.
Chuck, thank you so much for sitting down with us. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for watching or listening, depending on how you're absorbing this podcast, and make sure to check us out next time.